I'm Dane Rose, and in this video, we're going to explore the theme of the system, as enemy and as friend. So the first thing to look at is what is a system? And we begin with the sphere. Now, the sphere is a wonderful geometric shape. It is simultaneously infinite and one. Now, its one is obvious. It is one sphere, and it metaphorically represents the totality of existence, the one. And before language, we all resided, participated, were part of the one. And with language, which in mythological terms is the descent out of the garden into the knowledge, the knowing, of good and evil. Now, what we're talking about is splitting the circle. We're moving from the one into the two. Now, the two is an illusion, meaning there is no two. Why? Because the one cannot be split in half. It can be imagined through language. And you can see this in obvious reality. Let's take the earth, for example, which is another metaphor for the one because it's much bigger than us and it's part of our reality. So, theoretically, we divide the one, the earth, into north and south. That's taking the one and cutting it into two. But this is an illusion. Why is it an illusion? Well, there is no north without south, right? Because the illusion is that it's two separate pieces. There are no two separate pieces. It's an idea overlaid on the reality of the one. Now, how do you know that? Well, we're talking about the North Earth and the South Earth. There is no Earth without the unification of the North and the South, right? Just try it, cut the Earth in half and let all the molten core of the Earth dribble out into space. Let the axis of the Earth, can you imagine? It's like a wheel spinning. We drive a car, and our cars are, of course, wheels. And we copy the Earth because circles are graceful, right? But imagine you just cut all your tires in half. The up tire and the bottom. Okay, fine, cut them in half. And then drive 70 miles an hour with 4 tires like this. The car falls to pieces, right? It's no longer a car by the time you're driving a car at 70 miles an hour. If you can even get it to turn, right? And the same is true with the Earth. What happens with all the oceans, right? They change drastically. The molten core changes drastically. What happens when the two pieces bang together? It's not the Earth once it's cut into two. It's something. Presumably, at some point in the evolution of reality, there could be a cutting device competent enough to cut a body like the Earth into two. It is just no longer the Earth once it is cut into two, because it's very likely that every mammal and plant on the Earth would rapidly go extinct if it were cut into two. And so, we descend out of the garden, out of the ecology, into the knowing of one and two. But it's important to understand that the two is not real. You cannot have one without the other, right? We split the body into the right side and the left side. It's just not very real, because if you cut the body in half and say, okay, you over here, you're the separate right side, and you over here, you're the separate left side, well, they don't function. You cut an orange in half, it's no longer, or it rapidly deteriorates from being an orange. And so, at a very deep level, the ecological framework of reality, the interconnected whole, remains the underlying reality. But we are relating with reality through the lens of language, which is the lens of the cut. Language is basically a pattern recognition metaphor or symbol that helps the limited processing power of the conscious mind organize things in a variety of ways and perceive them through the lens of division. So we have the one, and it's important to understand that we cannot relate to the one consciously. First of all, it's unconscious. Why? Well, just say, try and have a conversation where you get intimately aware and understand someone. Go on a date and say, what do you like to eat? Everything. Well, that's somewhat helpful at suggesting they have a rather broad palate. What would you like to do? Anything. Jump out of a balloon, commit suicide? No. You mean you're open to any movie? Very, very narrow thread of cultural repetition. Get a bite to eat. I'm open to eating anything that is served at a local restaurant, for the most part. And but it's really useless. You don't get to know anyone until you understand, okay, I like this, I don't like this for this reason. Now you're getting to see what? The illusion of the individual, the particular details of one conscious mind. And it is an illusion that we are individuals because we don't exist without the planet. We don't exist without the African plains. We don't exist without any number of more than 1,000 ancestors. There may be 10,000 ancestors. The human being doesn't exist without the mammalian heritage. The mammalian heritage doesn't exist without the reptilian heritage. The planet doesn't exist without the solar system. The solar system doesn't exist without the galaxy. The galaxy doesn't exist without the universe, and the universe doesn't exist without the Big Bang. So we all begin with a single moment. And there is a thread of multidimensional interconnectivity between that single moment and every single thing in existence today. I mean, presumably, if you were a good enough scientist, you could go back to the moment of the Big Bang when the entire universe, this is obviously a little bit of a stretch to believe. Science asks us to believe that the entire universe once fit into something the size of a pea. It sounds like magic, right? You mean to say that everything in this hand once fit into the size of a pea? Yeah. Okay, do it again. Show me. Science is the art of replicatable experiments. Fine, science. Show me, get me. Why don't you take my hand, cut it off, right? We'll pretend it's separate from the rest of the body for a moment through language. Cut off the hand and pack it into something the size of a pea. We can't do it. Well, sounds like faith, doesn't it, right? We don't believe in faith. It's all replicatable. We only follow logic and reason and da-da-da. Okay. You're asking me to believe that the entire universe, all of it, was once less than the size of a pea. Pretty big leap of faith there. Why don't you compress one hand into the size of a pea and show me how you did it and repeat it, and then maybe I'll believe that you could get a human being to fit into the size of a pea. And if you do that, maybe I'll believe that you could get a bus. You take a school bus and fit it into the size of a pea, and we'll have something to go on. But otherwise, you're superstitious. You're insane. Looney Tunes. The entire universe fitting into the size of a pea. What nonsense, right? But these are we wouldn't have nonsense. We wouldn't even have the word for nonsense without language. So language is what we use to carve the one into many. And the bigger our vocabulary, the more diverse reality appears through consciousness. It's the same with the circle. If you just say black and white, night and day, it's a pretty simple world. You have two words. But if you start saying, there's an hour, you're dividing the circle into 12, right? Now it's a little bit more complicated. Now you're dividing it into minutes, now into seconds. It's getting more and more complicated the more we interject language into reality. Now the reason that the sphere is both the one and many, infinite, is the interesting paradox of the sphere. Because when you generate a sphere in a computer, you don't just say sphere. What you do is, you start off with your imaginary plane, which is invented. That's how big of a number system do you want to use? It may or may not be the case today, but there was a time when 256 million distinctions were the limit of a computer chip. What that meant is if you take color and you refract it through a lens of 256 million, you get 256 million little changes in color. Add up all the different colors, and it's taking the color spectrum, and it's refracting it into 256 million. Now, are there only 256 million colors? Of course not. That's the limit of the computing power of a specific computer chip. Now, when you have a billion distinctions within a computer chip, you can create a billion different distinct colors. When you have a trillion distinctions within a computer chip, you can refract the color spectrum into a trillion distinct colors. There's just one problem. The human brain does not have the capacity to hold more than around 30, maybe 50 distinctions at one time, right? So you have to go into subsets and subsets and subsets to compensate for the fact that the conscious mind has a difficult time remembering one 20-digit number. Someone gives you their phone number, and you can remember them. Why? Because it's one word, Bob Woodward. I remember Bob Woodward. That's not too difficult to remember. It's two distinctions, Bob and Woodward, correlated with a face. But when Bob gives a phone number, see, now we're talking 10 digits. My brain doesn't want to remember more than 10 digits. We wonder, why do we have a 10-digit number system? And we're getting into the domain of system. A 10-digit number system. It's easy. Because our RAM, the biology of the human brain, has a hard time with numbers over 10. It's a good reason to repeat, isn't it? You're learning counting for the first time, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, Zik, Cow, Zen, Zube. Wait a minute. I'm losing track, right? It's getting to be too many words. You know, imagine if there were 1 trillion words for each number. It's like, it's too complicated. Okay, we've got a plan. The limited RAM of the human brain seems to cut out around 10. Can you remember a 10-digit phone number? If you repeat it 3 or 4 times, I remember my phone number, but what about this person who just rattled off a 10-digit? And what about a 20-digit phone number? You see, that's, it's too much, right? Well, I could use a memory system and all that, but yeah, I don't want to do all that. So we'll just we'll go up to 10, and then we'll say 11, 12. 12 is 13. 11 is 1 plus 1, and then 12 is 2, sounds like 2, and 13 sounds like 3, and 14 sounds like 4. That's a good system. So we get up to 19, and then we go to 20, which is 2 times 10. So if we can't remember anything that is more complicated than 10 distinctions, we'll just repeat the 10 distinctions with slight variations. Is that how reality works? No, that's how the human brain works. And because that's how the human brain works and we forget things that are too complicated, well, we just reinvent the number system as an ecosystem of that first 10 things that we remember, we can put back together. Now, is that how the world is? Is time or space divided into 10? Of course not. We impose the system onto the one. And we used zeros and ones. Why? Because silica doesn't have a lot of variation. You put an electrical charge on silica, it's on. You take the electrical charge and it's off. So a 0 and 1, a binary system, is intelligent. And then we use the binary system to replicate a 10-based number system. Why 10? Because that's all we can remember. So we're really reducing the one, the interconnected ecology of infinite complexity, down to the level that our limited brains can digest and do something with. And that's how we get a 10-based number system, our limitations. That's how we get language, is variations on mathematics, right? Words are one language, which is a symbol of reality. Math is another language that is a symbol of reality. And neither are real. This hand does not exist without the body. It exists in language, separate from the body. I say this is my hand and this is my arm. Well, why aren't they all called one thing? Because they're all part of one thing. If the hand, you say this is a fingernail, but the fingernail doesn't grow without the finger. The finger doesn't grow without the hand, and the hand doesn't grow without the arm, and the arm doesn't grow without the heart. So why isn't it one thing? The human doesn't exist without the temperature, without the sun. And so why isn't it just one? Well, we've decided to invent complexity with language so that we can play with the mythology of reality by playing around with words. And we've made words very real. Some people listen more to words than they do to their own senses. It's a fascinating thing. Fake news, whatever. You look out, you saw what happened, and then somebody says, this is what happened. They say, oh, that's what happened. I thought I saw this happen, but you say that's what happened? Yeah, that's what happened. I see. And the word becomes more real in people's mind than the underlying reality. I'm told this is bad. I'm told this is good. I didn't have anything wrong with it, but apparently it's bad. Why? Because somebody said so. The one was divided into good and evil, into two. Now, by doing that, 50% of everything in existence becomes evil, because you cannot create a polarity. You cannot impose the institution of duality onto an ecology, onto reality, onto the circle, and not have it be equal halves, right? For there to be black, there has to be white to provide the contrast for what black is and what it isn't. Black is defined by what isn't white. All polarities reference their opposite. And whenever you take one and cut it into two, the two are always equal. Cut an orange in half, and they're equal halves. Otherwise, you didn't cut it into half. Maybe you made a fudge and you're not very good with the knife, but then it's not half. But if you cut it in half, and so north and south are equal, east and west is equal. There's no scientist who will say, oh, you can fly east 300 million miles, but you can only fly west 1 mile. No. Every polarity is equal. So when you create good as part of a duality or polarity, you are creating evil, which also means that when you create evil, you are creating good as its counterpart. And if good and evil are in a duality, this is good and this is evil, then they are equal parts. So the knowledge of good and evil, the descent out of the garden of oneness, of ecology, is taking the entire probability field, the entire possibility field, the entirety of present reality, and it is imposing a thought structure of duality in which half of everything that is, and half of everything that is probable, and half of everything that is possible is good, and half is bad. Half is good and half is evil. Okay, well, that kind of makes a little bit of expression. Even the word, if you take we like living, and so it's not at all surprising that evil is live backwards. We want to live, so if we cut the world into two, where half of it is good and half of it is bad, then we want to live, so let's call living good, okay? So what's the opposite of that? Well, dying. Why don't we just take the word live and spell it backwards? And that's it. So if evolution is good, then the opposite would be devolution. And that's bad. And there we have it, right? Evolution is good. Therefore, in a dualistic paradigm of good and evil, devolution is bad. Why? Because we said so. We said that evolution is good. We said that devolution is bad, and so it is, right? It's magic. We said so, and so it is. Right? God first created the Word, right? And with it, reality. Reality emerges in consciousness through language. Now, language is the system. Now, going back to computers, which is another metaphor for human consciousness, the computer does not create a circle with one. It doesn't just say circle. No. a computer creates a circle with dots, and at a certain number of dots, we stop seeing the dot and we see the 1. We say that's not 10 million dots, that's 1. That's a circle. So that's how a computer creates it. The dots are the system. The 1 is outside the system. The 1 is referenced through the system. So the dots are the system, the 1 is referenced to the system. Now the other way that a computer will generate a circle is with lines. It'll say, okay, we got this line, 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 this line. That's too angular. Let's add in this line, 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 and there. And you keep filling in the angles with new lines. And slowly, oh, that's no longer 10 million lines. That's a circle. So at a certain point, the pattern emerges out of the particles. The forest emerges out of the trees. I plant a tree here, and I plant a tree here, and I plant a tree here, and then there's a forest. The forest emerged out of the trees, a replicated pattern. So this is how we move from the system into language. We do it, this is how we move out of reality, ecological reality, into human consciousness, human language, and systems. We do it through lines, and we do it through particles. We do it through words. Words are the knives. Words are the knives that cut the body of the 1 into pieces. The great goddess, the 1, is before the lines, and the masculine expression is the cut, the distinction. So in that polarity, masculine and feminine, the goddess, the feminine, is the curve, is the 1, is the circle. And the masculine is the point, is the particle, is the individual, is the line. The circle is the group. The individual is the particle, is the point. Now, in cultural expression, we have a variety of different emphasis around the planet. You know, Asian cultures are more about the circle, are more about family and the group. Western cultures are more about the individual and the 1. So we have a feminine, masculine dichotomy and tension. So the system is an overlay on the 1. We start with the 1, and we construct a system. Now, we construct a system in language, and all language has a certain number of distinctions. Now, in geometry, like this is the circle in a 5-point system. This happens, this happens, this happens, this happens, and then this happens. In a 6-pointed star, it's broken into 6 points. The circle can be broken into an infinite number of distinctions. However, at a certain level of complexity, the brain of a human being currently tapping out at around 10, which is why we have a 10-based number system rather than a 30-based number system or a 50-based number system. Mathematics completely changes if you change the number system. If you use a 15-point number system to repeat rather than a 10-point number system, you get completely different mathematics. You can build computers and stuff and all that, and you can do architecture and geometry with a 15-point number system, etc. It's just you get different results. And that's the key. You know, when you understand that if you use different words, you get different meanings, and you use different numbers, you get different results, and you use different number systems, and you get different results, and you use different languages, and you get different results, you can understand that reality is in the interplay, it is in the dance between the one that is unconscious without language because it's one. You know, if you ask someone, what are you thinking? And they say nothing, you are not conscious of what they're thinking. You say, what are you thinking? And they say everything. It's equally useless, right? People distinguish what they are thinking through language by carving out a little bit of the one and saying, I'm over in this area right here. And we say, oh, okay. You're mad that your dad said this. Those are words, but they communicate part of the geography of the system in which communication is taking place. So the system is conscious, right? Because the one is not. All things are. We are one. I am one. Well, you can't even say I am one. If you're one, it's just one. You only need one word to talk about the interconnected ecology. One. One. What do you have to say? One. 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 Why bother talking, right? There's just one word. It all means the same thing. One, use one, one. So you move out of consciousness, right? So as you enter the system, one and two. Now you have contrast. Now you have distinction. So now you can create contrast. We're these people. We're the good people, right? They're the bad people, right? You don't have good and bad without it. We're the northern people. They're the southern people. We're the Igwe people. You're the Segwe people. Two words, right? Us and them. Us and them. We're different. Well, as soon as you have difference in a dualistic paradigm, you've got enemies, right? Well, as soon as you have difference in the context of good and evil, good and bad, where half of everything that is good and half of everything, therefore, is bad, and half of it is bad, therefore, the other half is good, now you have to decide who's the good people. And you have to decide, therefore, the other half is the bad people. Now you've got war. And one of the reasons you have war is that nobody wants to be the bad people. In fact, I don't think there has ever been a cult in human history, in the 10,000 cults induced through language, through mythology that have existed in human history. The 10,000 cults, there's never been a cult that says we're this people and those are that people, and we are the bad people. We're the ones that should exist, that are the cause of all the world's suffering. We ruin, we don't deserve, in fact, we need to be killed. We're the bad people. Those are the good people. And we need to be killed. Because if we died, then there would be only good people. And then it would be wonderful, right? It would be wonderful because only the good people would exist. And the best thing we could do would be to kill ourselves. And it's our duty as a cult to kill ourselves because we're the bad people. There has never been a cult in human history that has committed mass suicide or that just says, yeah, we are the horrible people and we want what's bad to win. We are the bad people, but in our mythology, the bad people are stronger and better, for better or worse, than the good people. And so because we're bad, we're all the things that are bad, the opposite of good. Because we're bad, that's why we're going to win. No. Every single cult in human history has divided the world into us and them, into good and bad, into devolution and evolution. And every single one of the 10,000 cults and languages and mythologies in human history has said that they are the good ones. You won't find a spiritual teacher out there that says, I'm a corrupt hypocrite and I'm one of the bad ones. You won't find therapists out there, despite 85% of them being incompetent, saying we're part of the majority that don't know what we're doing and don't tally and don't do statistical results. You won't find anyone saying, yeah, I'm the really crappy contractor, hire me. In fact, I'm such a crappy contractor, I'm not going to even give you a bid because I wouldn't want to disturb you with my incompetence. No. You divide the world into good and bad, and everyone is good, and everyone different from them is bad. And so you have war. And the war is always the good people trying to kill the bad people, who are the good people trying to kill the bad people. And so as soon as you have the knowledge of good and evil, you descend from the garden into a life of strife because you are half of yourself. It's all there is in an interconnected one. You are half of yourself at war with another half of yourself. Now, who wins in a tug of war of completely equal halves? Who wins? Who wins in a tug of war when you have exactly the same pulling power? What is winning when you're all part of an interconnected whole? It's a very, it's highly problematic to descend into the knowledge of good and evil, into the language of good and bad, because you are striving, by definition, as part of half of what is, against the other half of what is, which is all interconnected. It's problematic. So what can we say about systems? Systems are the masculine counterpart in the duality of masculine and feminine, which is a good moment to understand why the duality itself is an illusion. So we say that men are separate from women. These are men, these are women. And in the war between the sexes, women will say they don't need men, except without sperm, there aren't any women. And men will say that they are better than women in a chauvinistic culture, in a patriarchal and chauvinistic culture. Men will say that they are better than that which created them, which is highly irrational. I wouldn't exist without a woman, but I'm better than what I depend on. This is utter nonsense. But all cults are nonsense, because ultimately duality is nonsense, because ultimately human consciousness is not as real as the interconnected ecology that underlies human consciousness. There has to be a one for human consciousness to cut up into pieces. And so if you say that cutting things into pieces is highly elevated, well, the underlying reality of the one is a necessity, a requirement before you can cut it into pieces. Now, the big joke of cults and culture is that they are constantly pretending. If you take a pyramid, a cult is the tiniest piece of the pyramid. It's up here. Human beings are resting on the one. They're resting on the entire mammalian history. They're resting on the entire evolution of plants. They're resting on the planet, which is resting on the galaxy, which is resting on the universe. And the stupidity or blindness of the pinnacle, as it is expressed in the chauvinism of human cult thinking, is that this somehow is better than this or this or this or this. It's a form of stupidity that is completely irrational because, okay, you're better than that, so who needs that, right? Let's just be purist, right? So there you are, your little triangle. Well, first of all, you don't exist. You take away the oxygen provided by the plants that you're superior to. You're dead before you can maintain your next superior sentence. You're a fucking moron if you think you are superior to plants in any innate sense. Now, do you have the superior capacity to cut things into language? You betcha. But you also have the superior capacity to make wildly erroneous equations that undermine your own existence, which most plants are not doing. And so you're a fucking moron. If you look at sustainability, a tree is more intelligent than you or me. So it's important to understand that paradox is implicit in language because language does not ultimately make sense. The idea of superiority is a fallacy that is so stupid, so dumb, that by definition, if you're going to divide the world into better than and less than, which doesn't make any sense, but if you're going to do that, then anyone doing that is less than that which is not. So the very act of creating I'm better than you, humans are better than plants, men are better than women, is so dumb that anyone who creates that particular paradigm is worse than those who don't. And so just by creating the I'm better than paradigm, because very few people create realities where they're less than. It is an abuse phenomena in human culture, but you won't find many cultures saying, we're the bad ones, we're the less. You will find within capitalism and chauvinism, rich is good, and they're the rich ones, and so you'll find that kind of inferiority dynamic. But the real problem in any of these superiority paradigms is they're not scientific. It makes absolutely no sense. If the pinnacle is better than the base, then you should get rid of the base. But then there's no pinnacle. If men are better than women, you should get rid of the women, just have the best ones, but then there's no men. If whites are better than blacks, get rid of the blacks, but then you don't exist since we all emerged from the African plains. If humans are better than animals, kill all the animals, we're doing that. It's just we're undermining our own ecological survival. And we were once animals. You know, most mammals spend their time eating, sleeping, having sex, without a mortgage. They eat organic food, except where humans have put chemicals on them. They don't have to pay taxes. They don't have to buy real estate. They eat, they sleep, they have sex for free. How are humans better than that? We sleep less, have less sex, with more stress, for a lot of money. It's nonsense when you try and create this moral superiority. We're the good ones, they're the bad ones. Particularly when you understand that all war emerges out of that thought. And you understand that everyone suffers in war. The winners suffer, the losers suffer. So why are there winners and losers? Well, because we make it up. You know, I stick a flag on your country and I suffer. And you take your flag down and you suffer, but I'm the winner. It's nuts. Complete nuts. So we can say that the system is masculine in the counterpart of masculine and feminine. Because when we talk about a system, we're talking about a pattern of words or a pattern of numbers. A system is a pattern. This is a 5-point flow system through what? Through the circle. Now, we can say that the purpose of a system is to be conscious of the unconscious. Because if we just say an infinite number of space, it means nothing. Infinite is too big to be conscious of. If we say there's no space, we can't be conscious of that either. We have to say it's 3 inches. And now we've got an image that we can be conscious of. We're not conscious of reality, we're conscious of our image of reality. So now we say 3 inches, we divide the 1 into inches, and we say it's 3 inches. Now we've got something to be conscious of. So we can say that the system is that which gives rise to human consciousness. And what we're conscious of are symbols of reality through words and numbers. Now, to test this hypothesis, try and think a single thought without words. Anything at all. There's no words, including numbers, which are words. Number 3 is just a word. Be conscious of something without a word. Any word at all. You could say, well, I, that's a word. Have, that's a word. That's a word. Sensation. Of, burning. Okay, be conscious of that sensation of burning without any of those words. Consciousness, as we know it, does not exist without language. So we can say that systems give rise to human consciousness. Now, what's interesting is a system gives rise to human consciousness, but if it is repeated too simply and too monotonously, we go back to sleep again. So that's a paradox, right? So without language, without numbers, we would have no consciousness. That's the first system. And yet, dung, 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 dung. What's the system? Well, it seems like there's a dung sound that's repeated every half second. Dung, 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 dung. Now, if there's complete silence and no language, there's no system. When you have a word and say that's a sound, we have consciousness. But if the sound is repeated monotonously, it's a simple system and it's repeated, then we go to sleep again, right? If the system just goes on and becomes humdrum and humdrum, what is that? It's pointing out what is a hum. It's not very, it's not an a cappella opera song. You don't go unconscious with that, but you might become humdrum. We're talking about simple systems. Hum, 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 hum. Mm-hmm. It's too boring, right? I want some a cappella. I want some opera. And then drumming. Dum, 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 dum. It's monotonous. My life has become a meaningless drumming of repetitive, I get up, I do this, I get up, I do this, I get up, I do this. And I feel asleep. I'm repeating a system without creating anything new, right? So we have the system creates consciousness, and simple repetitive systems put you back to sleep. Now, this is an interesting tension then between systems, because up here you have waking, and down here you have sleep. That's a system. It's a binary system, sleeping and waking. Pretty simple. I wake up and I sleep. Now, of that portion, the sleep in our cult is the most unconscious. We don't track our types of sleep. Many of us don't bother remembering our dreams. We don't develop lucid awareness. So it's the half that we, in our chauvinism, it's the half that we neglect. So sleep a good chunk of time. And what's interesting in dreams, which speed up, is you can live a lifetime in a dream, which means that potentially the 8 hours or whatever we sleep is more potent than the 16 hours we're awake. Because in the 16 hours awake, we cannot live a lifetime in those 16 hours. But in 10 minutes, at a certain frequency of brain, we can live a lifetime in those 10 minutes. But we can only live one day in 16 hours. So you could say that sleep is more important than waking consciousness, because if human experience is what we're here for, that's why we invented language and cut the world up into bits, etc., then you could potentially have more of it in sleep time than you could in waking time, despite the fact that sleep time is shorter, which makes sleep more efficient for having human experiences. Well, we can say that that's not real. Well, of course, when you take reality and you cut it in half of it is not real, and half of it is real. Anytime you create a polarity, it's half. So what we have to say, if for something to be real, there have to be things that are not real. And if there's real and not real in a polarity, then they have to be equal. So half of all that is has got to be not real, and half of all that is has got to be real. And then we get to decide what is the real part. So we say, well, real part is what our senses see, is what other people agree with their senses, and that's what's real. And what's not real is what our senses don't see. Okay, so dreams are not real. So this most potent avenue of human experience is relegated to the not real by the real. The real relegates half of reality to the not real. And so we then have to say, well, okay, what is real? Okay, this is real, this is real, this is real. Why? Because we said so. We then have to take the other half that is the opposite of that. So if what my senses see is real, then what my senses don't see isn't real. It's perfectly rational, right? This is real, therefore this is not real. It's just that when half of reality is presumed to be good and half of it is presumed to be bad, we then have to say, well, which is better, the real or the unreal? And then we say the real is good and the not real is bad. So we've just rationalized ourselves into a delusion in which a highly potent arena of human consciousness is not real and is bad and is therefore underdeveloped in a cult that believes that, relative to a cult that says that could be the opposite. Dreams and sleep are good. That's the real world. And this is the echo. Because that's, Plato flipped it. He said that the world around us is a shadow cast by the real world in a luminosity that is too intense for the conscious mind to grasp. The conscious mind is tracking and measuring the shadow of what is real. Well, if you flip the world that way, well, then you would, who cares about, daily life and sensory experience, but meditation and this. And so you have a flipping. But you don't get synergy. You don't get an embracing of the whole unless and until you embrace, until you transcend the knowledge of good and evil, the polarity that this is good and this is bad. Because if you let go of that polarity that this is good and this is bad, particularly in absolute terms, because there's no doubt contextually that this is better than that. For example, if you are cold, that's a big if. If your body is cold, which we'll describe as, let's say, your core body temperature sinks to 90 degrees, right? Then it is good, if you want to live, to be in a warm temperature. But is it good or bad that the temperature has gone down? I mean, if we say that global warming is a problem, then it's bad for global warming for you to turn on the heater so that you can live. Be better off for the planet if you died and kept the temperature low, if what you're focusing on is global warming. But if you're focusing on your body continuing, then it would be better if the heater was turned on and your temperature rose. And so you've got a lot of relativity in any duality. But to say it's objectively good or bad, that it's 85 degrees or 20 below zero, it makes no sense. You've got to tie it in with something. Because I want to manufacture this object, and because the factory equipment only operates when the power grid is on, and because the power grid is turned off in wildfire settings, and wildfire settings are alerted when it gets over 98 degrees, it's good for me and my goal that the temperature does not get over 98 degrees. You have a whole equation that is built in language. So this is a few things about systems. Now, one of the other important implications of a system is that it's less real than the underlying reality before the system. That's one thing. The other thing is when you take the one, and because we tend to create simple systems, life is moving through the circle. The Earth is spinning at 16,000 miles an hour. It's revolving, spinning. Now, we go through the circle with angles because it's too complex to be aware of the fine points. Now, one of the consequences as you take the circle and the sphere and reduce it into the system is that you create angles. Each of these things is an angle. Now, the straight points are easy to sleep in and easy and efficient to move on. If you're driving this racetrack, you're coming along, this is called the straightway. You can speed up, you can go fast, it's really easy. But when you get to this sharp angle here, you've got to slow down. You doesn't feel as comfortable, and you can't be asleep. You've got to pay attention. Otherwise, you bang into this wall. And so one of the things that a system does is it creates friction points, which are these angles. Anytime you have an angle like that, it is difficult. And if you have really sharp angles from really simple systems, you can find yourself cruising along, but because you don't understand the system you're in, you hit a brick wall. You're spending credit card debt, and then you have to pivot from spending money to making money, but you weren't prepared. And so you spend up, and then you hit your limit, and bing. Suddenly, it's not any fun anymore, right? Because you're in a binary system of spend money, make money, spend money, make money, and you hit a wall. So systems reduce the grace of the sphere into a cycle of transiting angles. And you have moments that are smooth, that are the straight points, clean sailing, don't have to think about anything. Money's coming in, this, that's coming along, clean sailing. And in every system, you get to the point of and you've got to pivot to a different angle. And energy wants to continue going curved or straight, doesn't want to make the pivot. So you've got a conflict as you navigate the pivot. It's hard on the vehicle, it's hard on the ego, it's hard on the car when you travel a loop like this. So this is something else we can understand with system. Now, the more complex and symmetrical the system, the more graceful the journey. There are no pure circles as we would engineer them, but if we could drive in a big, graceful circle, it would be a very pleasant ride. No stop signs, no stoplights, no cross, just a nice, gentle drive around the circle, all the way around, all the way around. It's a nice ride, but you go to sleep in that simplicity, just round and round and round. And so we also see that these stress points in the systems that we use to navigate reality are bumpy, because you bump into them, but they're also wake-up points. Those are the points you wake up. You're falling asleep at the wheel, and you hit a pothole, or you hit the curb, and you wake up and you start paying attention to the wheel again. You fall asleep and you wake up again. Oh my goodness, I didn't see that happening. My bookkeeper says we're $400,000 overdrawn. Oh, something has to be done here. You wake up. You get out of the sleep. So you hit points as you transit a system, and you wake up. But you also hit, and they're uncomfortable, right? And so we can learn this aspect of a system. So a system is not the reality. It is a metaphor or a system of consciousness for understanding reality. The other thing that we can see is that when we abide by the system because we can't relate to the underlying reality, we create suffering. Suffering is innate to human consciousness through language, because language is a system. And whenever you follow a system rather than the innate underlying circle, you get through the circle, but at these bump points, you have suffering. So what we can say is that no system is perfect. No system is perfect. All systems create suffering. And yet, all systems also create consciousness and enable communication, at least through language. So systems are paradoxical. In the Star Wars metaphor, the Empire had the goal of bringing order to the galaxy. Now that's the system. We are going to impose a system, and then people are going to follow a system, my system. So we also see another source of conflict there, because everyone has their own system of identity. In fact, identity is a system. What is it a system of? Identity is a system of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. Number one. Number two, all identities are different. You analyze the thoughts of two people. They may agree on most of the key things they agree are important to agree on, whatever it is of the politics of the day, for example. But you ask them, do you agree on what's your favorite color? No. Do you agree that abortion or this is more important or less important? We both agree, but do you agree that it's a 9 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10? Okay, so you agree on that one topic. All right. Do you agree that Puerto Rico is a better vacation spot than Thailand? Oh, you don't agree on that. So you don't agree on most things. You just have agreed on what is important, and in the important areas you are mostly on the same page. Why are they important? Because you agreed they are. That's all. You've said that it is important to have an opinion on abortion, but fine. You want to go to Puerto Rico, I want to go to Thailand. That's not important, so it's not important we agree on that. Well, someone else could say, wait a minute. None of us are having or not having an abortion. We're all over 50. Give me a fucking break. What's really important is Puerto Rico or Thailand. And you didn't agree to that. I'm not speaking to you anymore. You think Thailand is, you could agree that that's important. I mean, how nuts do you have to be to talk about something that has nothing to do with you whatsoever? In a world where you cannot change and force other people to do stuff, The science is very clear. When you ban abortions, you create an underground medical community where women's and children's health suffers more than if you do not. You do not stop all unwanted pregnancies. The Philippines is highly Catholic, and so abortion is, a big deal there. So one of my former girlfriends had an unwanted pregnancy because, I said, so what happened? She said, my mother stuck a coat hanger up my vagina. That's what happens when you ban abortion in a country and in a culture where not everyone wants every child at every age of, that a child is conceived, particularly during high school or whatever it is. So, these are things that you can elevate and say are important or not important. So which ones do you decide are important and not important to you? Do you follow your cult because everyone's discussing this, so that's what you have to have an opinion on? Or do you say, you know what? What's really important is how many minutes I meditate. I notice a big difference in well-being if I meditate for 15 minutes or whether I meditate for 25 minutes. At the 20-minute point, there is a shift. So what's important is measuring whether I meditate for 15 minutes or 25 minutes. That's the most important thing in my day, because that affects my well-being more than anything else in my day. So we can have an argument about that. I mean, don't waste my time with abortion and stuff. I'm not having a child, and I'm not even in a relationship. Just don't waste my time. But come on, let's really hash this through. And maybe this ought to be promoted as an important piece of science, a breakthrough in well-being at the 20-minute mark, right? And so let's do some studies and do this, because we've decided that science is important. So these are some of the things we can see in systems: order and chaos, consciousness and unconsciousness, masculine and feminine, complex systems versus simple systems. Simple systems are easier to remember, but they're more violent to drive on. Complex systems are more smooth. If you develop if you impose a 300 million line system on top of a sphere, it's very difficult to even communicate it because it's 300 million distinctions, but it's a very, very smooth ride. You don't notice the angles that you do if you add a three-point system. If you take the sphere, if we understand that all reality is spherical, and you just get to decide how to perceive it through which number system and through which system. You have a triangle. This is a difficult road to drive on. You've got three things to pay attention to. Okay, it's simple. It's easy to remember, because remember is to put it back together again. You only got three pieces. It's not that hard. But that's a painful road to drive on. These kind of hairpin turns. What about angles, hairpin angles? You can't drive this at 200 miles an hour and go around this curve, or you crash. And so that's, the cost. And so these are some of the tensions that you and I just made up and navigated with language. It's a more complex model of the tension, and so there's more to remember, so there's challenge there. But it creates more fluidity, more freedom in its complexity and in its implications, that we can create and recreate whatever system we choose, with its paradoxical pros and cons, that all rest on an interconnected one, an interconnected totality, that all emerge out of the feminine ecology of one. And what we do with those systems that we create to be aware and then navigate that which we have created with our awareness determines a large extent of our lives. Hi, I'm Dane Rose. All knowledge begins with a paradigm, and out of that paradigm comes an idea, an awareness that we adopt, reject, or synthesize into something better. It doesn't become wisdom, it doesn't become useful until we take action, until we integrate it into not only our thoughts, but our feelings, our body, our words, and our way of being. For that to occur, we have to move from the passive media paradigm into more active engagement. In the link below, in the More Information section, is an invitation to join a very small, deliberately filtered, high-quality discussion with a group of people who share a common language and want to work with these ideas with me and with one another, with the sole goal of creating 10 times more sustainable well-being for ourselves and those around us per unit of energy invested. Thank you for watching.